Dubai Marina was never just a place, it was an image, a skyline of glass towers stacked edge to edge, water reflecting everything like a blurred mirror, yachts lined up as if by a designer, rooftop bars that never seemed to close. For years that image defined success in the Gulf. Arrive, post the view, book the cabana, and you had made it. That was the story Dubai sold to the world. Now when people walk through those same streets, they see something different. Stillness, not calm, not quiet luxury, empty, darkened terraces, moored boats that don't move, streets that don't fill, even at night. The visual is the same, the feeling is not. Dubai Marina is no longer a flex. It's a test of how fragile a city built on spectacle, connectivity, and trust can really be. Dubai Marina didn't empty overnight by accident. It emptied because the tubes that fed it, guests, investors, and perception, were suddenly pinched shut. The immediate trigger is the conflict with Iran. In late February 2026, U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian targets triggered a chain reaction that hit Dubai like a calculated freight train. Airspace closures, flight cancellations, and travel advisories from the U.S., UK, and much of Europe warning their citizens to avoid the UAE entirely. The numbers are brutal, not gradual. In the first days after the escalation, hotel bookings in Dubai dropped by roughly 60%. More than 3,000 flights a day were disrupted, with around 80% of them outright canceled. This is not a dip, it is a shutdown of the international visitor pipeline. Dubai's hotels had been running at about 86% occupancy in January 2026. On the ground, consultants now report that figure has fallen to roughly a quarter of that, with some properties hovering between 20% and 30% occupancy. Luxury hotels on Palm Jumeirah and downtown Dubai, which were charging premium rates only weeks earlier, have quietly slashed prices by as much as 40% just to keep rooms filled. Emirates, Dubai's flagship carrier, temporarily suspended all flights to and from Dubai before beginning a phased restart. By early March, it was operating about 60% of its usual network. Dubai built its brand on being the global hub that connects everyone to everyone. The moment that connectivity breaks, the illusion of invulnerability collapses fast. Tourism Economics estimates that 23 to 38 million fewer international visitors could travel to the Middle East in 2026 compared with earlier forecasts, representing a loss of $34 to $56 billion in visitor spending. In the UAE, tourism accounts for nearly 13% of GDP and supports about 925,000 jobs, most of them filled by expatriate workers. When the tourists vanish, the consequences are not abstract, they are faces. Restaurant workers, tour guides, yacht crew, hotel staff, security staff, service workers, people whose income depends on a steady flow of visitors suddenly facing uncertainty and potential layoffs. Workers from countries such as Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and others who came to Dubai chasing better pay and stability now find themselves in a different story: unpredictable hours, reduced shifts, and the fear of contracts not being renewed. The Dubai Marina Promenade, once thrumming with crowds at all hours, now has terrace restaurants only half full. The walk at JBR shows empty beaches and half-shut cafes. This is not a temporary lull. It is the first visible sign that a system built on traffic and trust can unravel in a matter of weeks. Dubai Marina did not become vulnerable because of the war alone. The war exposed vulnerabilities that were already building quietly beneath the headlines. Before a single missile was ever fired, the foundations of Dubai Marina's perfect urban dream were already cracking under pressure from inside. In 2025, Dubai celebrated its third consecutive record-breaking tourism year, with 19.59 million international overnight visitors, a 5% increase on 2024. On paper, the numbers were a triumph. The government praised its brand, the headlines called it a success story. But underneath those arrivals, other statistics were quietly accumulating. Traffic jams that worsened every year, a housing market that began to price out the very people who gave the city its energy, and a cost of living curve that shifted faster than wages. Congestion in Dubai's roads and highways became more severe with each passing year. This was not just expats complaining online. a prominent Emirati lawyer and public figure, publicly criticized the congestion problem, calling for both immediate and long-term mechanisms to fix it. When someone inside the system raises that kind of alarm, it signals that the infrastructure is not keeping up with the scale of growth. The same roads that bring tourists in also carry millions of workers to their jobs, and both groups now jam the same arteries. Even more quietly, the cost of living began to hollow out the resident base that Dubai Marina was built on. Rental prices jumped 18% to 22% in 2024 alone, with another 10% to 18% rise projected by the end of 2025. In Dubai Marina itself, studio apartments now rent for 70,000 to 95,000 AED per year. One bedrooms sit between 110,000 and 170,000 AED. Two-bedroom units range from 160,000 to 260,000 AED annually. That translates to a one-bedroom apartment in Dubai Marina, costing roughly $30,000 to $46,000 US per year, an amount that puts these apartments out of reach for many mid-tier expatriates. These were the people who gave Dubai Marina its character: junior professionals, restaurant staff, fitness instructors, retail workers, digital nomad adjacent freelancers, those who were not ultra-rich but still wanted to live close to the water, close to the malls, close to the lifestyle. As prices climbed, they were pushed out to Jumeirah Village Circle, Al Barsha, and other suburbs an hour away, on highways already operating at capacity. Those who remained in the area now face overcrowded public transport, higher rents, and a daily grind that feels less like a reward and more like a gamble. In a bitter twist, the tourism boom that was supposed to make Dubai unstoppable was also quietly hollowing out its own residential base. The same demand from foreign visitors that drove up hotel rates and restaurant business also fed the real estate market, inflating rents and pushing long-term residents further away. The city began to resemble a resort city where the locals live in the hinterlands and the front row is reserved for those who can afford to pay full price. Dubai Marina is not just a tourist stage. It is a vertical city, a cluster of skyscrapers where thousands of people live, work, and sleep at heights that would have been unimaginable a few decades ago. The image sold is control, the most futuristic, safest vertical living environment on Earth. Then, in the middle of the night on June 13th, 2025, that image flickered. A fire broke out at Marina Pinnacle Tower, a 67-story high-rise in Dubai Marina. Emergency services moved fast, and every one of the building's 3,820 residents was evacuated from 764 apartments. No lives were lost, which in itself is a relief, but the details that followed were deeply unsettling. Some residents later said they did not hear fire alarms before the flames spread. They only realized there was a fire when they saw it from their windows or smelled the smoke in corridors full of people. The context only made it worse. The nearby skyscraper known as the Torch had caught fire twice before, in 2015 and 2017. Marina Pinnacle itself had already experienced a fire incident in 2015. This was not a one-time accident, it was a pattern, a cluster of ultra-tall towers, some of them already with a history of fire incidents, now housing thousands of residents in a densely packed marina zone. In the aftermath, the emotional cost escalated. Nearly 350 residents who had been moved into temporary hotel accommodation received notices slipped under their doors, telling them to vacate by noon on June 20th, just 7 days after the fire, with no clear alternative arrangements in place. One resident who had lived in the tower for 13 years later said the eviction notice added insult to injury. 13 years of paying rent, building a life, and contributing to the neighborhood, and in a single week they were told to leave. For many people, the fire was not just an engineering problem, it was a trust problem. Dubai markets itself as a meticulously planned city where risks are engineered out, where safety codes are world-class, and where nothing like this should happen. When a high-rise fire touches a building twice and displaced residents are given a week to figure out what comes next, the narrative of perfect control begins to crack. Dubai Marina is not empty because of one isolated event. It is empty because several pressures, geopolitical, economic, social, and infrastructural, arrived at the same time, exposing a structural vulnerability that experts had been warning about for years. The war turned off the international visitor tap overnight. The cost of living pressure had already been thinning the long-term resident base, with expats quietly leaving amid rising costs and security concerns. The high-rise fire incidents raised live questions about safety in a city defined by vertical living. Dubai's leadership is not blind to these warnings. The government has repeatedly promised long-term infrastructure upgrades, affordable housing initiatives, and stricter building code enforcement. But the question is not whether the warnings were heard, it is whether the response was fast enough and whether it went far enough to counter the short-term logic of building more, selling more, and attracting more visitors without fully accounting for the strain on residents and systems. In early 2026, with hotels slashing rates by 40%, with flights still operating at only about 60% of pre-war levels, and with residents still processing what happened at Marina Pinnacle, Dubai is getting a direct answer to that question. The city is being tested on whether it can protect not just its image, but the people who underpin its reality. Dubai is not finished. It has survived shocks before: the 2008 financial crisis, the global pandemic, and periods of regional instability. Each time, the city recalibrated, adjusted pricing, tightened marketing, and waited for demand to return. The same pattern is already visible in early 2026. Hotel discounting, airline network adjustments, and cautious optimism from regional travel directors all point to a belief that geographically, Dubai will still be on the map. Industry professionals continue to argue that the Middle East has always been a resilient market. As one regional travel director put it, demand tends to bounce back quickly once perceived stability returns. Flights can resume, advisories can be lifted, and tourists can and will return. The structural vulnerability does not change that basic fact about the region's appeal. But here's the uncomfortable distinction. A city can recover as a destination without recovering the feeling that made people fall in love with it in the first place. The Dubai Marina that people remember was not just towers and yachts. It was an energy created by a mix of residents, workers, and visitors who could still afford to be there. Those deeper structural issues, the affordability crisis, the strain on infrastructure, the lingering questions about high-rise safety do not disappear when a ceasefire is announced. They require policy choices that go against the short-term logic of building more, selling more, and attracting more. Dubai Marina will almost certainly fill back up. Demand for the Middle East as a travel destination has proven resilient over time, and as geopolitical tensions ease, flights will restore, advisories will loosen, and tourists will return. The city will adjust prices, tweak marketing, and recycle its image. Supply will meet demand again, at least on paper. But the version that comes back may not be the one that people originally fell in love with. The mix that made Dubai Marina feel alive, middle-income expats, service workers, and affordable lifestyles layered under the luxury, is harder to rebuild than hotel occupancy rates. Once people are pushed out to distant suburbs, once trust in safety and stability is eroded, once the narrative shifts from "you can live here" to "you can only visit here," the character of the place changes. Dubai has always sold a version of the future. In Dubai Marina, that future was packaged as a perfect, safe, vertical lifestyle where risk was engineered out and comfort was guaranteed. The war, the rent curve, the fire, and the eviction notices all chip away at that promise. The vulnerability is not just physical or economic, it is emotional. Once people stop believing that the city can protect them as easily as it can attract their money, the relationship changes. The real question about Dubai Marina is not whether the buildings will be occupied again. It is whether the atmosphere that once defined them can still be sustained. Dubai Marina was never just a skyline, it was a combination of people: mid-tier expats, service workers, young professionals, restaurant staff, fitness instructors, and tourists who all moved through the same streets, same cafes, and same promenades. That mix created a feeling of density, energy, and accessibility. People could live relatively close to the water, walk to the marina, grab a coffee, and feel part of the scene without needing a six-figure income. As rents climbed, as middle-tier residents were pushed to the periphery, and as the city leaned harder into high-end tourism and real estate speculation, that balance began to shift. The emptiness now is not just about fewer tourists, it is also about fewer people who live there in a way that feels permanent. When the residential base thins, the city loses its background noise, the breakfast routines, the late-night returns from work, the casual conversations in the elevators and stairwells. The marina can look full again with packed weekend visitors, but the everyday hum, the texture that made it feel alive, may not automatically return. Dubai Marina is not a symbol of collapse, it is a symbol of exposure. It shows what happens when a city optimized for spectacle, connectivity, and rapid growth meets a shock that targets its weakest points: airspace, trust, affordability, and high-rise safety. The emptiness on the Marina Walk is not just a dip in tourism, it is the visible side effect of a system that was already under strain. The war did not create Dubai Marina's vulnerability, it revealed it. The long-term pressures had already thinned the resident base, overloaded the infrastructure, and raised quiet questions about whether the city could sustain its own dream without breaking the people who lived inside it. The fire and the eviction notices did not invent those doubts, they made them impossible to ignore. Dubai will almost certainly survive this moment. But the city will face a choice, whether to rebuild the same model or to adjust its structure so that the people who give Dubai Marina its atmosphere can still afford to be there when the lights come back on.